taking the time to listen to this module. My name is Dr. Justine Dowd, and I am an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Calgary. I recently just finished up my postdoctoral fellowship with the Health and Wellness Lab, and I'm so honored to be talking to you today about a topic that I'm very passionate about, self-compassion, the art and science of being kinder to yourself. I initially became interested in the concept of self-compassion when I was feeling really overwhelmed when I was finishing up my PhD a number of years ago now. And I came across Brené Brown's work and I realized that I could actually be much kinder to myself. And then I learned a lot more about self-compassion through Kristen Neff's seminars on self-compassion and began researching how it can really help people cope with a variety of different situations, from celiac disease to IBS to having a diagnosis with cancer. And so I'm here providing this module today to help you understand more about what self-compassion is, the research in this area, and help you practice some different self-compassion exercises that will help you in a number of different areas. So if you haven't already, please pull out pen and paper, and you might like to write down some notes as we go. And once you've got the pen and paper out, I invite you to just get comfortable in your seat, take a couple of deep breaths and close your eyes, and just really bring your attention to your breath. And take 3 to 5 long, slow, deep breaths. And while you're doing this, just giving yourself permission to let go of whatever it was that you were working on before. Put it aside. It will be there when you get back after this break. Just literally picture it in your mind, setting it aside. Wonderful. So I'd like you to think about something that's causing you stress or anxiety in your life right now. And just jot it down, the first thing that comes to mind, and we'll be revisiting this as we go through today. So now in the first activity, I'd invite you to think about a time and just thinking about how you treat a good friend. So a time that a close friend or a loved one was feeling really badly about him or herself and they were struggling. How did you respond to your friend? What sort of things did you say? And how did you try to make them feel? You can put the video on pause and come back just after you've taken about 30 seconds to a minute to just really think through how you tried to make your friend feel. Now, when you're back, I invite you to think about a time when you felt badly about something and you were really struggling. How did you or how do you typically respond to yourself? What sort of things do you say to yourself and how do you try to make yourself feel? Again, put the video on pause and come back when you're done. And now that you've taken the time to reflect on both of these, I now would like you to think about the similarities and differences that you notice between how you treat someone else and how you treat yourself. My guess is that you might notice that you're much kinder to other people than you are to yourself. Often we're much more patient, caring. We can see the situation or the difficult thing that's happened as temporary rather than stable and long-term. So just taking time to, again, reflect on that, some of the differences. I know when I first did this exercise, it was a big aha moment for me. So take some time. If you didn't actually do this at the beginning, press pause, go back and do it now, and come back when you're ready. So now that you've gone through this activity, I really like this image where this girl says, "I never thought I was a bully until I listened to how I speak to myself. I think I owe myself an apology." And so if you're someone who really resonates with this, knows that there's a kinder way of being to yourself, you're not crazy. This is completely normal. So many people treat themselves much more harsh than they would treat someone else. The research shows that 80% of people are kinder to other people than they are to themselves, and almost no one treats themselves better than they treat other people. However, we also know that feelings of stress and anxiety are incredibly common in society today. There are really high levels of burnout, depression, anxiety, stress, and loneliness. And we know this is prevalent for a number of reasons. Even before COVID, these were all extremely high, and now this has just gone to a whole new level. And unfortunately, being so tough on ourselves can actually lead to long-term suffering or struggling. As you're probably aware, these are just so common in society today. And if we're struggling with a health scare, potentially with a cancer diagnosis, or maybe a loved one struggling with COVID, or maybe losses, it can be so easy to let these feelings of stress and anxiety and being hard on ourselves actually get so strong and debilitating that they prevent you from taking care of yourself and taking the right actions to make yourself well. But fortunately, self-compassion has actually been shown to improve all these feelings and help people actually engage in health behaviors and feel better, improve their long-term quality of life. So let's look at what exactly is self-compassion. So self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. It's made up of three components: self-kindness versus self-judgment. And self-kindness is just the way that we speak to ourselves in a kind, caring, loving way rather than being judgmental. And so again, the first step, especially if you're new to self-compassion, is to simply just start to tune in, become aware of the thoughts and how you speak to yourself. The second part of self-compassion is this idea of common humanity versus feeling isolated. So this idea of we're all in this together, that we all go through difficult times, and this is just part of being human. And this can be really powerful when we're going through something difficult, to remind ourselves, no matter what it is, I'm not the only person who's gone through this or who will go through this in the world. I'm not alone. And then mindfulness instead of over-identification. And so when we practice mindfulness, this can be really powerful because it helps us from going down this ruminating pathway. And it can be so easy, especially with all of the external stressors and triggers that are going on in the world right now, to easily go into a negative spiral. And when we practice mindfulness, we bring our attention back to the present moment and focus on the here and now with non-judgment and acceptance. And there are a number of different meditations and different things out there. If this is something that speaks to you, mindfulness is a beautiful practice that can really help with the self-compassion piece. So now let's look at self-compassion specifically in cancer. And so why might self-compassion be helpful for people who have been diagnosed with cancer? The cancer diagnosis is often experienced as traumatizing for the individual and their family. And the research shows that psychological coping skills are essential to helping people to effectively cope with cancer at the diagnosis and through their journey with treatment and survivorship. Specifically, programs that teach people how to be more mindful have been found to lead to a variety of different outcomes, including reduced depression, anxiety, stress, fatigue, and fear, and also improvements in sleep, quality of life, energy, physical functioning, as well as these feelings of acceptance, mindfulness, and responsibility. The researchers found that these feelings were really, really important, but a key part was the cultivation of self-compassion and being kind and loving with oneself in a caring way. And let's continue to look at this on the cancer journey. And so this was a really neat study that actually looked at self-compassion and measured self-compassion at diagnosis. And they actually separated self-compassion into positive and negative self-compassion. And so the positive parts of self-compassion are that self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And they found that the more people practiced this when they were diagnosed, that they actually had lower levels of depression, anxiety, and fatigue during and after treatment. So overall, self-compassion may assist with emotion regulation during extremely difficult times in one's life. And this study was specifically looking at people on the cancer journey. So again, coming back to what exactly self-compassion is. And we know that self-kindness, when we practice this, it can actually result in fewer critical self-judgments regarding changes in physical appearance, psychosocial difficulties, or life limitations that can be imposed by the cancer experience. And being able to frame one's experience in light of common humanity. So this shared experience with other survivors can provide a sense of social connectedness that can counteract feelings of social isolation that are so common. and mindfulness rather than over-identification. And so when we practice mindfulness, this can reduce excessive worrying and rumination that leads to anxiety and depressive symptoms. And so although I'm using the cancer example, in this case, the research shows that this actually is applicable in many different situations. People struggling with divorce, going through, I research celiac disease. We know it helps with digestive health problems. We know it helps with mental health, numerous different areas. So no matter what it is that you're going through, practicing these different components can lead to short-term and long-term benefits. So now let's dive into mindfulness and resistance. When we practice mindfulness, it refers to the way that we observe our experiences with non-judgment and acceptance. Because we know what we resist persists. And when we meet suffering with pain, and when we meet pain with resistance, this equals suffering. So the more that we try to push pain away, the more we resist it, the more we actually suffer in the long run. But what we can feel, we can heal. And so as we start to practice self-compassion, this will help you to actually feel what you're going through and to process it rather than push it away. So now I'd like to take you through a self-compassion meditation. So I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. And so this is a really nice, continue to focus on your breath. This is a really nice, what I like to call self-compassion break. And this is something that you can do at the beginning of your day, end of your day, or any time in the middle if you feel triggered, stressed, anxious, upset, overwhelmed, whatever it is. This is a really helpful thing that you can spend 30 seconds on or 30 minutes on or somewhere in between. So again, bringing your attention to your breath, eyes are closed, and just think of something that's bothering you. It can be what you wrote down at the beginning of this session or maybe something else that comes to mind. Often people think of work-related stress, a fight with a friend or a loved one. Maybe, again, it's what you wrote down at the beginning of the session. And as you think of this thing that's bothering you, see if you can find the discomfort in your body. Where do you feel it the most? See if you can make contact with the sensations as they arise in your body. And now I invite you to take one hand and place it over your heart. Feel the gentle pressure and warmth of your hand. You can feel free to place both hands on your chest, noticing the difference between one and two hands. Some people feel uneasy with their hands on their heart, so feel free to explore other possibilities, such as crossing your arms to give yourself a gentle squeeze. Or sometimes people like to cup their cheeks, or maybe even just stroking your arm, or cupping your hands in a nice, kind, gentle way. Whatever it is that feels loving and caring to you. And now say to yourself, may I accept myself as I am. May I forgive myself. May I be strong. May I be safe. May I accept myself as I am. May I forgive myself. May I be strong. May I be safe. If these words don't feel right to you, think of what you might say to a close friend or a loved one who is struggling. Just noticing how you feel now. This is likely a positive feeling, and it's part of what is involved in being self-compassionate. It's a basic way of giving yourself love in the form of soothing touch. You can also remind yourself that other people feel this way too. You're not alone. Taking the time now to truly feel what it is you're feeling. To be present and mindfully acknowledge what you're going through. So you can come back and open your eyes whenever you're ready. And you can leave your hands over your heart or however you had them for as long as you like. And just noticing, how did you feel? Sometimes people notice at the beginning that they had a really tight, clenched jaw, or maybe a racing mind. Maybe it was tight in their chest or in their neck or shoulders, or even a deep in a pit in their stomach. This can happen for a variety of different reasons, but this is your body whispering to you, telling you, listen to me. And as you start to listen, you can start to tune into your body and know, and then but respond with this loving, caring, kind way of being with yourself. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just kind of talk about the other side. So this idea of backdraft. And so if this self-compassion break didn't actually feel good to you, if it felt inauthentic or weird or difficult or different, know that you're not alone, that this actually is completely normal as well. And it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you were doing it right. And so I first learned about this idea of backdraft back in 2018 when I heard Dr. Justine Dowd. She came and spoke at the University of Calgary. And I learned that there's a lot of research on how people who are new to self-compassion, it can feel really scary, tough, and inauthentic for some people. And so this is often the case if you're used to being someone who's really harshly self-critical, if you're used to pushing things away or down and not listening to your feelings, then this can actually, when you take the time like we did, this can feel really uneasy. This can be really activating, it can be really stressful for you. And so as we start to pay attention to these feelings and give ourselves kindness and caring, it can feel kind of weird if you're not used to it. And so Dr. Neff explains this as this idea of backdraft. So if we know if a house is on fire and all of the flames in the house are consuming up all the oxygen, and then someone opens the front door, the oxygen comes rushing in and the flames go rushing out. So this can be the same thing if you felt uncomfortable during this experience. So if you started to actually let those feelings up, acknowledge them, and give yourself the time and space to feel this way, then it's possible you're experiencing this backdraft, this overflow, this flooding of difficult emotions. And this actually is a necessary part of the transformation, because the more that we push these things away, the more that we're not actually going to process them and heal, and they come back and they nag at us. We feel them in different ways. And so Dr. Neff talks about a number of different ways that we can cope with this. So number one is to name it, to tame it. So see if you can just acknowledge what it is you're feeling, rather than trying to push it away or process it or understand where it came from. Just acknowledge, this is what I'm feeling. That's grief. That's anxiety, that's frustration, that's anger. Whatever it is, just see if you can name it. Sometimes people just can breathe through it, maybe take a walk, and try to accept it and be mindful. And say something to yourself, such as, this is really hard for me right now. I'm going to take a bath because this is so tough. And this actually starts to build the neural pathways in your brain for a self-compassionate response. So again, just to summarize this slide, if you felt awkward, uncomfortable, if it didn't feel good, practicing self-compassion, it means you actually were doing it right, and it will get easier. If it did feel too overwhelming, please reach out to the Health and Wellness Lab, and we can provide you with resources to get in touch with a mental health professional to help you with fully processing all of that. You don't have to do this alone. Okay, so why isn't self-compassion just a natural way of being? So we know that from evolution, we actually have this negativity bias. So it's because of this, through evolution, we've evolved to be looking for threats to our survival, to be looking for threats to our relationships. And so we have this negativity bias where it's always looking for things that might hurt us. And because of this, we need to intentionally pay attention to the positive things in our life so that we can have this balanced experience. So some examples that might be helpful to help retrain your brain and focus in this area is journaling. And there are a number of different ways you can journal. Some people like to keep it daily positive, so just where you write down 1 or maybe 10 things that were positive that happened to you. Sometimes journaling at bedtime is good, or even this daily positive can be great to talk about with your family at the dinner table or over coffee at breakfast the next morning. Just finding different ways to really look for opportunities to build positivity into your day. Journaling is also helpful just to set time aside to reflect, to have time to do that, to reflect on what you've been going through, what you've been feeling. And then I encourage you to then respond with a self-compassionate response and write down, how would I treat a friend who is going through this? What would I say to them? Another option for journaling is simply a gratitude journal. Writing down what you're grateful for. So these are a couple of different things I encourage you to think about that can really start to build those neural pathways back into your brain that are more positive and a self-compassionate response. And it doesn't have to be positive all the time, but it's a kind, caring, loving way rather than a harshly self-critical way of being with oneself. Another really key piece of taking care of oneself is this idea of how to say no. And so there's a link at the end of this. It's a really great article by Justine Dowd, and it's called 21 Ways to Give a Good No. And so if you're someone who struggles with saying no and you end up saying yes to all these things and then feeling overwhelmed, I encourage you to go and read this full article because it's really beneficial. So the first step is to prepare yourself to say no. And so this can be helpful if you think about, so for example, I love doing talks like this, but I know if I do too many of them in a month, that it can be overwhelming and then it ends up taking away from other things in my life that I value as well. So I set aside for a given month, maybe I can do one talk a week, and that's what feels good to me. And so then I'm prepared where I've set up these boundaries to take care of myself, to say no if needed, if I have more requests, then I can properly handle and still take care of myself and all of the things that are important to me. So think about what it is that you might be saying yes to in too many occasions, and then just start to come up with some boundaries around this. And then actually say no. And so this is where the article actually goes through 21 different ways. Some of them include simple strategies, the vague but effective. No, thanks, that's not going to work for me. Or ask me later if it's something you do want to do. Say, sure, but this month is fully booked. How about next month? Or the let me hook you up. If you know someone else who's interested in the offering, whatever it is, then you can connect them. So obviously these would be appropriate, more or less appropriate in different situations. But they just start to help you think about different ways that you can take care of yourself, that you can look after yourself and say no, so that you have room, space, and energy to say yes to the things that you really want to say yes to. And the third step is don't look back. And this is what the first two steps might seem kind of self-explanatory, common sense. But this last piece is what's so important, and not feeling guilty. And I find that if you actually prepare yourself to say no, then you don't feel guilty at the end. And now this is an activity that'll get you to just press pause as you go through and take time to fully reflect on each of these different questions. So I encourage you to think about in your life, is there something that you're resisting? Is there something that you're not change that you'd like to make that you're not making, or something you'd like to start or stop doing? Something that you know needs to change in your life, but there's resistance to it and you haven't been able to do this yet. And I encourage you to think about, how is it manifesting in you? Is it affecting you physically, emotionally, mentally? And again, just pressing pause so that you have time to come back and truly reflect on these questions, because this can be a really powerful activity to help you with using self-compassion for something that's difficult in your life. So thinking through, how is this manifesting in your life? Are there any ways that this current behavior, current way of being is benefiting you? And are there any ways that it's making it worse? So reflecting on both of these, and then coming back and now thinking through what we talked about in this session tonight, or today, whatever time you're watching this recording at, how mindfulness or self-compassion might lessen your resistance to this situation. How could it help you? So take a couple of moments to reflect on this and think about how you could use self-compassion for this difficult situation. Okay, so that's the introduction to self-compassion, the art and science of being kind to yourself. Now, if you're interested in learning more and moving forward in this, I have a couple of resources for you. So if you'd like some meditations, there's some on selfcompassion.org. Books by Kristen Neff and Brené Brown I find are really helpful. Meditations are also on different apps. I really like the Calm app. There's also an app for, there are many different Headspace I hear lots of people like. But if it's something that you like to have a guided meditation, go and check them out. There's so many different amazing resources available now. We talked about keeping a daily positive journal, or maybe even talking about positive things with loved ones. Music, there's even self-compassion playlists now. You can just Google it and these things come up. And then practicing no and not looking back or feeling guilty. Letting go of unnecessary suffering. So those were the two activities we did at the end. If you'd like to learn more, again, there's a lot more information at selfcompassion.org. There are full courses you can take. Dr. Neff even has a full workbook that you can get just on Amazon or through her website. And it's a really powerful workbook that you can take you through really practicing and learning how to be kinder to yourself. There's a link to how to give a good no. And I'd just like to leave you with this quote. A moment of self-compassion can change your entire day. A string of such moments can change the course of your life. Thank you for your time, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. You can reach me at jdowd@ucalgary.ca or connect with the group on our website or social media. Thanks for your